How's it going, you guys? So really quick in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I feel are some of the best resources for health information and kind of getting a bigger picture idea on what's actually causing disease. I've been vegan for over a year. I've done keto carnivore for over a year. I've been a part of all of these different health communities and dabbled in between pretty much everything. I've been reading peer-reviewed literature for years. I've been watching lectures from all of the world's greatest health experts, not only from vegan communities, low carb communities, Mediterranean and mainstream type of nutrition communities. I pay attention to all sorts of information from all of the different experts in all of these fields related to health. Um, these days, I don't rely on any one source. I am always listening to new sources of information. I'm reading books, watching experts' interviews, and things like that. But I realize that nobody has the answer. Nobody has the truth. Everybody has valuable information that they provide that contributes to the bigger picture that you've got to put together yourself. This is a major flaw that pretty much everybody suffers from when they're looking for, the truth about health and disease, is that they follow one guru or one community and they stick to it. It's tribalism at its greatest. Um, on one extreme, you have the fruitarians who think all cooked vegetables and all food in general is going to kill you, which is probably the worst thing you can do is raw veganism or fruitarianism. Then you have the scientific vegans, which generally do fairly well, but suffer from various problems. But they believe that animal fats and meat is the main problem, and yada yada. And they insist that removing animal foods from your diet is basically the best thing you can do. I was a part of that community for over a year, and when I realized the extreme flaws in the science that they use, I was like, oof, that sucks. Not to mention all the health problems I suffer from. I've done keto carnivore for over a year, listened to all of their advice, and basically they demonize carbohydrates as like the main source of disease in the world and yada yada. And I realize that that's not accurate either. I think in the modern age, with all of the processed sugar and refined foods in general, I think that is valid. But I don't think a high carbohydrate diet is necessarily the problem. And so again, people in the keto community are a lot of them are going to think like if they don't have a basic understanding of physiology and an understanding of Paleolithic ancestral cultures either, like human being civilization over the years, then they won't they won't be able to interpret the science in an accurate way either, because then they're going to be like, oh, it's insulin, and any person who eats over 50 grams of carbs a day is going to be unhealthy. Humans never had that much carbohydrates in their life, blah blah blah. Fact is, that's not true either. So um, it's very hard to get an accurate idea of what actually causes disease because it's a very complicated subject, and it depends on the person whose health is in question. Um, in general, so first of all, let me just say, if you don't want to spend the time that I have spent, which I understand, I'm lucky to have had enough free time for so many years to actually study science in depth on health. But if you don't have the time and you don't want to deal with all that, I believe starting with this book is a good place to go. Nourishing Diets by Sally Fallon. The reason why I say that that's a good place to start, it's not that her dietary recommendations are correct 100%. It's not about it's not about the diet tribe. It's not about the tribe that somebody promotes. It's about the main ideas and how do they stack up to reality, how they stack up in populations, and how they stack up mechanistically. A lot of times you'll find people, like, let's just say you have vegans who might have reversed heart disease, and they think it's because they remove red meat. Well, a lot of times you can get great results with a certain health protocol, but when you try to claim why it happened, that might not be accurate. So you can have carnivore people who remove vegetables, for example, and they reverse autoimmune disease. Their idea is that vegetables are just poisonous, and that's why they got the benefits they did from removing vegetables. But when you understand physiology, you realize, oh, you were probably allergic to certain foods or had an intolerance to certain foods, maybe caused by antibiotic use in the past. And removing those foods relieve the symptoms because you remove the food that triggered them in the first place, not because the vegetables in general are poisonous, but because you had a food intolerance or you had a food allergy. The same way that someone who's allergic to peanuts will suffer every time they eat them, but then when they remove them, they're healthy again. Well, is that because all plant foods are poisonous, or is that because you had an allergy to one certain plant food? You see what I'm saying? Anyway, the point here is that a lot of people, they get good results from something, but they don't understand the mechanism. And that's the problem with anecdotes. Anyone who tells you anecdotes are useless is a fool. The fact is, anecdotes are not a good, they're not a good way of figuring out causation. They're just a good way of figuring out, well, what works, okay? And then they can give us a hypothesis to study mechanism in detail to find out causation. And so anyway, what I like about this is it's just a gigantic book that compiles various populations of primitive people untouched by modern science who ate different types of diets of all kinds. They didn't eat just one diet. None of them were strictly, fruit and vegetable and meat paleo. None of them were strictly, vegan or vegetarian. They all ate different types of foods of all kinds, a large variety of food. Frogs, bugs, fecal matter and intestines from different animals. Some of them ate over 50, 60, 70% carbs. A lot of them ate grains, but they were properly prepared. Most of them ate some degree of animal foods, and it all depended upon what population of people, where they were located in the world, and most importantly, refined foods was a gigantic factor. This book talks a lot about the significant changes in people's health status when they started to add refined foods into their diet. And I think that nutrient deficiencies and overabundance of imbalance, like nutritional imbalance and nutrition deficiencies, are probably the number one cause of most disease. And so what I like about this book is that it looks at all of the different cultures, and a lot of these cultures have actually found different ratios of nutrients. For example, the Inuit, they found if they ate too much of certain types of liver or too much of certain types of fats, essentially, that they would develop some kind of disease, like they would bleed out if they had too much omega-3. And they didn't have science, but they learned through trial and error that if you eat the wrong ratio of omega-3, that you would literally bleed out. Or if you didn't have enough fresh food, you would have scurvy. They called it the white man's disease. Or if you ate too much polar bear liver, then you would suffer from what's debated as possibly vitamin A toxicity. And so, anyway, as far as carbohydrates and things like that, you have populations like the Egyptians who ate over 70% of their diet was carbohydrates from stone ground wheat bread. And they all suffered from certain degrees of arteriosclerosis, diabetes, and obesity. Now, of course, depending on what confirmation bias you're coming from, you will try to find other, try to say it's because they ate too much meat and blah, blah, blah. Fact is, even the elites, even the rich people, didn't have as much enough access to meat enough access to meat in order to cause significant health changes because of it. The majority of the animals were hunted, and the only domesticated animals they had was used for actually for carrying different resources back and forth, and possibly dairy. But the ancient Egyptians ate mostly a Mediterranean style diet. The two main contributing factors that most nutrition science experts claim are that caused their problem was, number one, the Nile River, which is where they got most of their water from, was infected by parasites and things, and so they had to ferment the water into beer. And so the majority of their hydration came from alcohol made from that, to purify the water. And so they were alcoholics, essentially, by, not by choice either. It's because that's the only way they were able to drink clean water. And that will contribute to fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, obesity, estrogen dominance, and heart disease. The second thing, though, is that they probably had nutritional imbalances, and I think that's where this whole carbohydrate thing comes into place, is that the majority of their food was stone ground wheat bread. And so they're probably suffering from a large amount of nutrient deficiencies. And when you're eating that much of your calories from carbohydrates in general, I personally believe protein deficiency is a very real thing. And a lot of people don't realize, but the 0.5 grams per pound a kilo, something like that, half a gram of protein per pound of body weight, whatever that, the recommendation set by the government is a minimum protein requirement required to prevent malnourishment, such as starving kids in Africa and stuff like that. But the minimum daily requirement is not the same thing as the optimal daily requirement. And not to mention, it's very, very weak, how they develop these recommendations for nutrients. I've talked a lot about this many times in the past. Anyway, this book discusses the blue zones. It discusses all of the work of Weston Price. It discusses, their hypothesis on what was keeping them healthy, what was preventing tooth decay, and things like that. They believe it was mostly fat-soluble nutrients like vitamin K2, vitamin D, vitamin A, omega-3, stuff like that. The fact is, though, this book is very eye-opening because it talks about basically our ancestors ate whatever was available to them, and if something was toxic, they tried to find a way to make it into a nourishing food. They tried to find ways to reduce toxins and stuff like that. So it opens your eyes to such a gigantic amount of variety of foods that were available to them. Everything from tree bark to, leaves and stems, to fecal matter, to frogs and bugs of all kinds, varying types of fish, and they would make oils. They would make bone meal. It's amazing. It's very eye-opening. And so this is, I think, a mandatory. This is a book everyone should read when they are first starting out on their health journey, because it'll save a lot of the problems that people run into when they begin believing in a certain tribe. Humans weren't carnivores, they weren't vegans, they were extreme omnivores that dominated any food source they could find. And I think that's key. I don't think that carnivory or veganism is necessarily going to kill you or cause health problems. I definitely don't think eating a carnivore diet is going to hurt you, even in the long term, but I don't think it's necessary for most people. I don't think a vegan diet's a good idea, but the point is, lots of plants, lots of meat, lots of variety No refined foods. Key. That's the key here. When you look at America and you look at modern society and you look at all these unhealthy people, you see lots of calories coming from sugar, coming from French fries, white bread. A lot of these foods are fortified with synthetic iron, which is horrible. A lot of hemochromatosis and a lot of iron overload in our society is caused by supplemental iron added to cereal grains and things. And in general, just refined foods that are not found in nature, that are stripped of all their vitamins and minerals, and then they add isolated vitamins and minerals back in. The thing about whole foods is science has only identified a small number of essential vitamins and minerals in foods, and we could be missing a lot. Cancer, different types of cancer could possibly be caused by nutrient deficiencies the science has yet to figure out that humans actually have. And these nutrient deficiencies, these nutrients that we could be missing, could be found in certain whole foods that people are eating in blue zones, for example. And this book talks about blue zones and the fallacies of the plant-based diet that aren't correct about blue zones. I think whole foods is a missing picture. And I think a diet based on variety is a missing picture. And I think where that variety comes from is a missing picture too. And I think the importance of animal foods, the fact that you could survive on animal foods alone, I think that's a missing key here. And I think all of these things, if you plug them into mainstream science, health science, if you go with this as a foundational understanding, and then you look at, well, what happens when people eat only meat? What happens when people only eat plants? And what does the science say? And is that science population-based? Because if it's population studies, what are the confounding factors that aren't controlled for? And this book can help you understand, well, shit, you know what? Those red meat eaters, if they're drinking a lot of sodas, and that's not controlled for in the study, well, then that study is pretty damn flawed. And that's what a lot of people misunderstand, is something called healthy user bias. And when you read this book and you understand, hey, refined foods start to kill people. That's literally what they found, is no matter what diet it was, plant-based, animal-based, it was the refined foods they started adding in that started to kill people. Another book that I don't think is necessarily like something you should just rely on by itself, but it's a very eye-opening read, is Good Calories, Bad Calories by Gary Taubes. I think a lot of his ideas are not true, but I think that this will give you a lot of studies to look up, a lot of thinking to do on your own, and this will really help you question nutrition science in a very productive way, especially if you're just beginning to kind of like want to know the truth beyond the dogma. Reading this book and not looking for, hey, is he right or is he wrong, but just reading this book and researching his references and researching his claims on your own is a really, really good way to expand your scientific knowledge without needing all the years that I put through and all these other people put through. But keep an open mind is an extremely important thing, because you will go through, no matter what, you will go through a period of veganism or a period of a certain tribe, and you will eventually come out the other end realizing you were wrong. And that's happened to me over and over again. Anyway, this is a really great book to kind of like get the best understanding of humans' like natural diet, I suppose. And then I think watching the lecture, was it Anthropology and the Origins of the Paleo Diet by Dr. Michael Eads, who is the author of the book Protein Power by Michael Eads. Watch his lectures, and it's not his diet isn't the truth, but it's what he talks about as far as human history and what happened to the Egyptians and the comparisons between hunter-gatherers and farmers. This is very important, missing information from a lot of people. So leave your questions and comments down below. Feel free to disagree with me. I'd love to hear from you guys. Talk to you guys next time.